This is the continuation of Chapter 2, Part 4 of The Resurrection of People and Eternal Life from Now On is Our Reality by Grigori Grabovoi. I'm Stephen Walters. I will be narrating. I am a real human being, and this is my real human voice. Once I was asked to regenerate, to restore an indoor plant perished a long time before. I created a proper thought form, and the plant came alive and grew green again, though due to the lack of water and soil in the pot had long since dried out. A proper thought form transforms the outside environment in the desired way. How can such phenomena be explained? The following fundamental principle underlies such phenomena. The world consists of interacting structures. Thus, change of one structure results in change of all other structures. Perception and consciousness are one of the world's structures. Therefore, by changing perception and consciousness, the world can be changed. That is why the reality reacts to a thought form, responds to it, and our objective is that the reality's response to a thought form of the resurrection would lead to the resurrection itself. In fact, it is similar to the training of the reality. Yes, the reality is organized in such a way that one can train it, one can teach it. You may, for example, quietly sit down and start practicing. The purpose of this practice is as follows. The reality must be trained so that it yields and produces the resurrection as a result. That is, the reality in this case is viewed as a controllable and trainable environment. We can look at these procedures still yet from another angle, though in substance, of course, all along we've been speaking about one and the same, just the wording is different. For someone who has an ordinary state of consciousness in the space in which the notion of time is in existence, there is a notion such as life. We enter the word resurrection and begin sort of moving it away, drawing it near, putting it in different positions relative to life. If we get it once into the region of space-time, where the notion of life is consistent with the element of its eternity, then the resurrection happens instantaneously. In section 2 of this chapter, I talked about how the resurrection of a person occurs when he encounters a specific space-time cell. I also spoke there of the fact that there is a possibility of a person who had experienced an interruption of events entering such a cell. He enters this cell and resumes living. Now I will give an example of one of the possibilities of interpretation of events. There are many cases when a person would suddenly disappear, often in public. He was here a moment ago, was talking to someone, and suddenly disappeared, vanished into thin air. Sometimes after a while he would reappear, looking absolutely the same clothes, the same age, and for him, this disappearance would go unnoticed. To him, it lasted only an instant, though 100 or 200 years could have passed. This person sort of fell through a certain space-time crack, and now he is here again. If much time has gone since his disappearance, his clothing, the way he talks, the words and expression he uses immediately suggest a different epoch to people around him. The essence of this phenomena is that in such cases, a person falls out into the space where the notion of time is not in existence. When in discussing Principle 2.3, I spoke of a temporary interruption of events for a certain person. I meant such cases as well. What man thinks, what he says, what he does is of eternal nature. 4.4. I have already said, when discussing Principle 1.8, that in the information area there is such a principle. Something once done exists forever within the time when it was done. The thought ranges among actions as well. That is why if a person thought of something, that thought is registered in the database. Moreover, it stays there forever, for there is nothing there similar to computer viruses, which exist in ordinary computer networks and can erase the information stored there. In the Cosmic Net database, information is preserved forever. Saying words, that is, speaking, also ranges among actions. As a matter of fact, this principle ensues directly from the fact that man had been created in God's image and likeness. God is eternal, and his every act is eternal. That is why anything man does has an eternal character. It is quite easy to understand this principle. The principle of eternity. It gives the gone ones an insight into the fact that they will be restored, regenerated. 4.5. The principle of eternity states that in the eternal system of connections, the existing connections have been put into place in such a way that the gone ones will be alive again. However, the spiritual aspect is more important here. It is, in essence, a spiritual principle. We already know that life is eternal in principle. This has been enshrined into the world structure. And since the notion of eternity has been primordially embodied into the notion of spirit, the living one knows, always knows, at least at the soul level, that he will not die, that he will live forever, and that provided he has a good command of the proper technology, he can resurrect others. And thus the consciousness of the gone ones and their soul understand perfectly well, both on their own and due to coming in touch with the consciousness of the living, that they will be restored, regenerated. And therefore, this principle, the principle of eternity, acts as a bearer of light, as the light that can guide a person and evolve him. It should be noted that when a person's departure occurs, from the very first moment after the departure, this principle, the gone ones, come to understand this principle, and they perceive it not only at soul level, but also quite consciously. Many of those who have experienced clinical death tell about an unusual calm, serenity, peace that would pervade them in that state, and about the light that would emerge. The serenity, the peace, and the light come from the contact with eternity. This is the Creator who gives the one trying to depart such an angle of understanding of eternity. Through the emerging light, God imparts the knowledge of eternal life. Those who have expanded their structure of consciousness to the level of perception of this knowledge come back straight away. I remind that while staying in a normal physical body, it is possible to quickly achieve the capability of experiencing the described states and understanding this and other principles. To do so, one has to raise the level of the state of consciousness. In higher states of consciousness, all these principles are just manifest truths. The moment of the gone ones around their country of life, magic for our understanding, actually is realized through the structure of our consciousness. 4.6. What does this statement, the movement of the gone ones around their country, is actually realized through the structure of our consciousness mean? This statement contains several aspects. We have already discussed one of them in relation to the previous principle, 4.5. Namely, even if the living one is not well familiar with the resurrection technology or doesn't know anything about it at all, nevertheless, the knowledge of the fact that the gone ones will be restored, regenerated, has already been enshrined into the structure of his consciousness. It already exists in the structure of consciousness of the living. And thus, as I have said, Grigori Grabovoi has said, the gone ones have this knowledge both at soul level and as a result of the contact with the consciousness of the living. There is yet another aspect of the statement under consideration. The movement of the gone ones is done through the structure of our consciousness, because in our consciousness, the notion of the departure and of the gone ones still exists. It is our belief that the departure is a normal, natural occurrence that enables it to happen. It is only because our consciousness allows the existence of the gone ones that they exist. When, with better general understanding of the fact that life in actuality is eternal, that death is unnecessary, that it, contrarily, only slows down man's spiritual development, when, with man's growing realization of these veritable realia of life, the notions of the departure and the gone ones have disappeared from the structures of his consciousness, and this new understanding has become a collective consciousness constituent, when everybody will live forever. There will be no departure and no gone ones anymore. So, it suffices to understand the world correctly, and there will be no gone ones. Everybody will live forever. In the formulation of the principle, the word movement is very important, but what is at issue here is not about the dynamics which exist while in the state of clinical death, and about which tell those who have come back from that state into our world. The corridors they describe, becoming calm, serene, at peace, the emergence of light, all these are true indeed, and are the result of the contact with eternity. However, I'm now speaking about the entirely different movement, about the dynamics, which is radically different. I am talking about the assemblage of the microelement and event base. In the state in which the gone ones are in reality, the notion of stoppage or cessation of processes does not exist. Immediately after the occurrence of the biological death, the assemblage begins. The assemblage in accordance with the structure of eternity. The motion of, for example, information starts, basic laws of being start being embodied. Certain microprocesses get underway, and so on. These processes are directed inward a person, as it should logically be when assembling his microelement and event base. Thus, as soon as the moment of the departure comes and the biodegradation of cells begins, that is, as soon as the body decomposition gets started, immediately at the same time, the processes necessary for the resurrection begin as well. An inward directed assemblage begins. All this essentially proves a sheer non-existence of the idea of death. There's only life and its eternal evolution. What has just been said in relation to the microelement and event-based assemblage after the departure allows seeing yet another aspect of how the movement of the gone ones through the structure of our consciousness occurs. Here's what I mean. When the living commemorate the 9th and the 40th days, or participate in some ceremonies or celebrations, such as, for example, Christmas, they thus lend a substantial support to the gone ones. For our consciousness, as we already know, is organized so that it contains the principle of restoration, regeneration, that is, the resurrection. And since during the mentioned celebrations, the interaction of the structures of consciousness of the living and the gone ones is particularly strong, the consciousness of the living, even if unaware of the fact, nevertheless, their consciousness helps the gone ones to be actively regenerating. That is the primary purpose of appropriate celebrations and ceremonies. They help the resurrection of the gone ones, facilitate their transition into the inner structure, and cause the assemblage process to accelerate. Knowing the principles of organization of man, his assemblage can be achieved instantaneously. Likewise, coming of a biological death can also be instantaneously stopped. In modern medicine, a high-voltage impulse is used in order to bring a person back out of the state of clinical death. It is a shock of a sort. However, since this is a mechanical method, it by no means always works. In ancient China, they would regenerate a person even from a much decomposed state. For these purposes, the acupuncture was used. Naturally, different degrees of decomposition required different approaches. If, for example, no longer than 3 days would have passed after the coming of a biological death, then the extremities acupuncture points would be used. Inserting needles into proper points would result in the resurrection. However, this approach is mechanical too. It is based on utilizing mechanical principles. And for that reason, I won't dwell on these methods, because in the first place, I'm giving spiritual principles. Though perhaps maybe it is worth mentioning another interesting phenomenon of the past. In ancient times, in certain localities, they knew the secret of preservation of people, provided they gave their consent. It was primarily applied in relation to warriors. When it was necessary to transport the warriors a long distance, they got archived, that is, were merely stacked in a certain place. Well, the same way that papers, which may be needed in the future, are archived. The warriors would shrivel, and in such a state, being just a mess of matter, they could be indefinitely preserved. But when the need in them appeared, a needle would be inserted in the right place of every warrior, or a specific mixture would be poured upon them, or a proper impulse of consciousness would be given, and the warriors would come back to life. Similarly, provided the specific conditions are met, certain mummies too can come to life. We can now turn back to principle 4.6. It refers to the movement of the gone ones about the realm of life, which from our perspective is a fairyland. Of course, we could say that the movement is not about the land, but about the realm of life. I, however, purposefully use here the word land, and more than that, the expression fairyland, for the word fairy in this case conveys a deeper meaning. The matter is there is an interaction between the world of the gone ones and the world of the living. Not only we, the living, speak, But they, the gone ones, speak too. They speak from there. And the fairy tale is in intermedium. A fairy tale, a legend, a sage, an epic include not only what was said by us, but also what was said by them. And when they speak for the living, their words come out in fairy images. Using scientific language, we may say that a fairy tale is a transformation system, an information transformation system, from there to here. And this information comes to us in the language we understand. Many fairy tale elements are child-friendly. Exposure to even 2 or 3 good fairy tales significantly facilitates the process of further development of the child. He thereafter develops dynamically. Of course, besides a tale, a very specific technology can be given to children, and then they will be able to become eternal almost at once, from the very beginning. And they will begin to develop as they should. Though the external world may orient them differently, nevertheless, children may be given such a program due to which the transformation of the society will take place, and within a short time. So, 2, 3 fairy tales may be enough for a child to acquire a dynamic form of development. And if in addition, children have been given an appropriate technology, then from the beginning, they will be able to evolve according to the principles of self-regeneration and eternal life. Then, everyone becomes introduced to the status of eternity from the start. Changes of geographical landscape resulting from earthquakes or from split-off of big rocks during avalanches lead to genetic and structural changes in man, because man reacts to the entire space. 4.7. First of all, let's go over what Principle 4.2 states. Man is the entire external and internal world simultaneously. Therefore, geosystem, common earthquakes, and the entire surrounding world in general, all this in fact is the manifestation of man's status. But why is it specifically the changes in geosystem resulting from earthquakes and rock shearing during avalanches that have been pinpointed in the wording of the principle? Because it is these changes above all others that lead to genetic and structural changes in man. Since the landscape and rocks have a longer formation period, and thus they are more connected with man's overall genetic structure. The important role played by existence time can be seen also using the example of buildings. A building starts affecting genetics. If it was built, let's say, more than 1,000 years ago, in this case, one may, in a sense, speak of eternity. Of course, this number, 1,000 years, is frankly speaking relative, but nevertheless, it reflects the existing situation. Such buildings do have effect on human genetics, and they have a particular influence on human perception. This is due to the fact that the longer a building exists, the more it is adapted to the collective consciousness. Such a building creates a certain status. We know the expression, the attraction of a building. Such buildings, such structures of their remains still exist, and the fact that they attract streams of tourists is not coincidental. The same is true for works of art. With the course of time, they increase in value. Auctions are good evidence of that. In addition to what I said, I will note that the evolution of eternity largely consists in raising not only the status pertaining to time, but also to space as well. It means the more new land is inhabited, the more areas are developed, the more stable the structure becomes. That is where man's desire for exploration comes from. Let's go over Principle 4.2 one more time. Man is the entire external and internal world simultaneously. This principle gives us an indication as to how to act properly in our external activity. If we, for example, construct buildings, they need to be built so that they tend to man's image and likeness. If we take, let's say, London, and notice how it is situated, it will become clear that it represents man's head. Moscow tends to the heart representation. These are two approaches in construction of man's image, based on external areas and internal areas. They are different approaches. The external areas are the areas of a greater manifestation of the collective consciousness. They are out of the physical body of man, and the internal areas are the areas of greater manifestation of the individual consciousness of a person. They are inside man's body. Why, for example, were there for a long time religious prohibitions against an autopsy of a man? a taboo to see what's inside the human body. The reason for that is that the formation of informational interconnections between man's external and internal areas in the image and likeness of God was still underway, as was the formation of man's consciousness. If you carefully read the exercises given in the appendix, you will see that the concentration I present is predominantly on external objects. This is because man's internal system frequently changes and changes radically, whereas the external objects possess stability in terms of their permanent existence in perception. We need still yet to clarify the following point. When I say that buildings must be built in man's image and likeness, on no consideration one needs take it literally. That is, that buildings have to be in the shape of little men. This question calls for a deeper analysis. I am referring to connections and interactions of shapes. One needs, for example, to understand the interconnection between the plane and man's shape, or the interconnection between the sphere and man's shape. With this knowledge, we can build absolutely stable eternal structures, including the ones based on anti-gravity. Buildings, and generally all kinds of structures, built in this way, will harmonize with man, and thus with the Creator. As to the problem of shape, interconnection between shape and information, as well as other related questions, all of them will be inquired into in one of the books of this series.